Welcome back to Change Ed.
Changed.
A podcast for educators by educators, talking all things education. But this episode is going to be about AI. A very interesting and engaging topic. And we're happy to have here with us a guest from Michigan.
Fire up, Chips.
Football mascots. We'll just roll around in here. Useless knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
And we're here at Pete & C 2024. We're happy to be the official podcast of Pete & C. We had a previous guest from Michigan, not California. From Michigan. And we have another Michiganite.
Michigander.
Michiganian.
Yeah.
Well, I like
Michiganite. That's a new one I heard.
Yeah, Michiganian. Here with us. My name is Andrew Kuhn. I am your favorite host of Change Ed. I am an educational consultant for the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. Here with me
Is the actual favorite. We still have the stickers to prove it. Patrice Semichek, an educational consultant from the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit.
and our football fanatic sportsman. I don't know. You said the thing about the logo.
I did the Chippewas. I was very excited. Central Michigan University. Yeah. Tony Marabito, Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit, Staff Development Facilitator.
And our guest, all the way from Michigan. If we're being honest, he drove here just for this podcast. There's no other reason that he came down to Pennsylvania. Is Dr. Troy Hicks. Welcome, Dr. Hicks.
Good morning. Thanks.
You are a professor of English and education at the Central Michigan University. Is that correct?
That is correct. Fire up, Chips.
Fire up, Chips.
See, I knew it would come back around.
Yeah. Thanks for that gift.
Yep.
Dr. Hicks, if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and kind of your impact or your perspective on AI and how you're engaging it with your practice.
Yeah, the short story for my educational path is I began my career as a middle school language arts teacher. Prior to that, I had been a writing center consultant as an undergraduate, so my approach to teaching of writing is very much in that process-oriented, conversational, trying to get students to elicit their own ideas and discover their own ideas through that writing process. Carry forward to graduate school, got connected with the National Writing Project and their model of teachers teaching teachers, and now fast forward to today where I'm interested in digital literacies and technologies. And so thinking about this AI work and especially the types of tools that we're starting to see pop up with Bard and Copilot and obviously ChatGPT, but then those other flavor of tools like WordTune and Writer and Copy AI, where the AI is built right there and it's constantly prompting you and asking you, do you want to expand? Do you want to condense? Do you want to add more detail? I think that these tools are going to become ever present in the work that we do. They're already quite present in the business world. And as writing teachers, we should be thinking critically and creatively about helping our students learn how to use them.
That's awesome.
What I appreciate from our conversations that we had before we started the podcast was you were talking about it more from the lens of what it could do for students and the impact of students. A lot of our conversations, obviously as an educator-focused podcast, have been the impact for educators, but the student aspect is equally as important, and that is part of the equation. So I'm wondering if you could just tell me a little bit more about that, your focus on the student lens.
I think the AI writing tools for teachers are going to be immeasurably useful. Just cut down that time to get that lesson plan done, that perfunctory email that you have to send, the general stuff in the parent letter that you can then go back and tweak and make a little bit better. So that's all really important. What I'm hoping then is that teachers are going to model their own writing processes for students, because just as we have for decades, we know that helping writers work through, how would I add this? What might I change here? What's a different word that would be better? Could I make this a compound sentence? Could I use a one-word sentence? Could I elaborate? What is it that I want to do as a writer in those moments? That's going to be complicated, and I mean that in both the good way and the bad way, by AI.
Yeah.
Suddenly, we're going to have not only spelling and grammar lines underneath our words, but we're going to see all kinds of other, again, do you want to expand this? Do you want to rewrite it? Do you want to add some imagery? Those are complicated choices that writers need to make. And what's correct or appropriate or ethical in one writing situation may not be in another writing situation. So if I'm just pounding out an email and it autocomplete punches in pretty much what I was going to say anyway, great. I can just do it. I don't need to cite that. It's just an email. I'm going to move on with the rest of my day. But if I'm writing a final paper for my 10th grade English class and my teacher expects that I'm going to have cited everything, including the use of generative AI, I better be sure to get my MLA or APA style citation in there and say where I got this information from. So again, the nuances of all these writing situations that teachers could talk with their students about the use of AI, I think is just amazing.
It could potentially complicate so much. Like, I never even thought about if I'm using AI writing a paper, that I would have to cite the fact that I was using AI to write the paper. And so the complications that come along with that for a student learning how to, first of all, write, let alone cite, which is hard enough as it is as a freshman in high school. I didn't even think about those implications. That's really interesting.
You mentioned your middle school background. So in a perfect world, we're in a middle school classroom. What is AI doing to help students? Like, what would you love to see from where we are now to where would you like us to get to in that setting?
That's a great question. So as I've worked with teachers this year and just been thinking about what these kind of mini lessons and conferences could be like with students, I could imagine a teacher, I'm just going to default to ChatGPT for the moment as our tool. Hey, we need to brainstorm. Well, yes, we could type in, this is my topic, XYZ, and all of a sudden we have a bunch of output from ChatGPT, blah, 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 blah. But what if you prompt it? Well, what are the debates around such and such and such? Or what are some key questions I should ask around X, Y, and Z? And we teach kids how to do that. Not only are those the metacognitive moves we want them to make as writers anyway, but now they're interfacing with the AI and they're getting those results back, and then they can step back from that. Oh, what did you type in? What did you type in? How was yours similar to yours? Did we get the same type of output? And then when you see what's happening, with Copilot or something like Perplexity, where it's actually starting to cite sources, that opens up opportunities for media literacy and lateral reading. Okay, let's take a look across all these sources that this AI has summarized and cited, and let's start to use some of those critical evaluation skills. So there's that. I could see students asking for feedback. Hey, here's my opening paragraph. I'm writing an essay about such and such. Is this a strong lead? Is this an arguable thesis? What other points might I want to make? That could be part of it too. One example I've done, I was working with pre-service teachers and they were talking about personal narratives for probably like 4th, 5th graders. It's right around the holidays. They're like, well, how could we ever use ChatGPT to get our students to prompt? I'm like, well, let's type it in. What was the student working on? I was writing a story about the holidays. My grandfather just died. We were all very sad. He used to tell stories. So we typed it in and then we asked ChatGPT, what are the most important parts of this story? What could I write more about? And it gave us a list of like 10 or 12 points. And each point had like 2 or 3 questions. And I got to be honest, if I was walking around in a 5th grade classroom and I had 30 students and I only had about 30 seconds with each student, in that case, I think that ChatGPT probably did just as good a job of generating a list of questions as what I could have done. And they're all written out, and the student can go back to them. So it's not just a quick conversation that disappears and then you move on. So I think there are lots of opportunities for thinking about it, not only as the writing that it outputs, but as a thinking partner.
So how are you helping your pre-service teachers become okay with using something like this? Because it is a little bit of a mind shift. They probably didn't grow up using it, or even if they're second career students. How are you helping teachers become okay with using something like that?
Yeah, I like that question too, because we're in this interesting moment right now here in 2024 where people, especially pre-service teachers who played the game of school pretty well for the most part. 9 out of 10 of them played the game of school. They know where the lines are. They know what's cheating and what's not. And when you say, sure, go ahead, use it to write your lesson plan. What? I can use this to write the first draft of my lesson plan? Yeah, go ahead and do it. And what was interesting in a workshop I was doing with some pre-service teachers a couple of weeks ago, a student did that. I think it was either Magic School or Brisk. It was one of the tools. Gave a lesson plan back about this science concept. She's like, this is the exact lesson my teacher just did yesterday in my observation. Wow. And I'm like, okay, so now that's the baseline.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you were in that lesson yesterday? Well, it was okay. It could have been a little bit more engaging. Great. So now you have the baseline. What are you going to do to make that lesson better? Right. What videos could you add as hyperlinks to give to students? What simulations could you find? What kind of active learning activities could you build in where they turn and talk or they do something to process what they've learned? you could have gone and Googled and gotten that lesson too.
Right.
And no offense to the teacher, because we're all busy, right? Yeah. Maybe that's what the teacher did, found just the standard lesson on that one science concept, and the AI gave pretty much the same lesson. But now, how do we teach this next generation of teachers to start there and then do something that can be more flexible and creative?
I love that reflection piece too, because it gives the teacher the ability to, okay, what went well, what didn't, and then how do I make it better, right? So having that baseline, it almost levels the playing field for most teachers, especially if they're overwhelmed and they're just getting started because they're keeping their head above water for year one. It's a great place to start.
Yeah.
You know, when you were talking about the list that AI had generated and how there was a list that the student then could refer back to, that they could use, but also then it was captured. It actually reminds me of the work that we're doing with this podcast. We're having all these conversations, we're around for these conversations, but we're intentionally trying to capture these conversations so that everyone can hear them, right? Otherwise, we're kind of like, we're keeping it in a little box, right? Like, we know all these things are going on. We're trying to intentionally get this message out to educators and to share that with them. And as I understand it, you and your group have actually started a podcast as well, doing kind of very similar work, correct?
Yeah, our Chippewa River Writing Project teachers have started a new podcast, and we're just trying to get it up and running. So we were talking off mic here a few minutes ago about analytics and all the intricacies of podcasting. But yeah, they're focusing on literacy practices in the classroom and trying to interview other educators as well. So it's a good start.
I think very much in the similar mindset of like, let's capture this, right? Because then, you know, kind of again, what we were saying with that list is once it's recorded and it's out there, then it's accessible for everyone. As long as you can get to the space, you can hear it and listen to it. Well, Dr. Troy, we are just about out of time for our 15-minute-ish podcast. And we'd like to give you the second to last final thought for AI, for what it looks like, for, you know, anything that you'd like to share as your sign off.
I would say with any technology, this is even pre-AI, right? I would always joke that, you know, our kids are button pushers, right? Like literally and metaphorically, they can push our buttons. But in this case, they can push the buttons and they can figure, oh, wow, look at what, you know, ChatGPT can do, or WordTune, or Writer, or Bard. But you are the thoughtful, critical, creative, educated person in the room with a bachelor's, perhaps a master's degree. You know the right questions to ask of those kids and of those technologies. So even though they can push the buttons, make sure that you're continuing to ask them the questions and think, again, critically and creatively about any technology, and certainly about AI. We didn't even have time to talk about all the challenges of AI with biases and hallucinations and so forth. So it's really, really important that educators play that role, even if they don't know all the intricacies of AI.
The thing that stuck out to me through this conversation was that it's not just about checking the boxes when you're using AI or getting something done, and it's about more than writer's block, but it can do so much more, right? It's not just something to go to say, all right, let me get this done. How do I expand? How do I elaborate? And what does that look like? And really, the other thing that stood out to me was, as educators, how are we empowering our students to reflect and work through that process? You had mentioned the ethics of things, right? Is this right? Is this wrong? And it reminded me that we're all raising humans. John Spencer wrote a book, and in there he said that we are human-centered with technology infused. So that mindset of like, how are we raising people to be thinkers, to be philosophers, to problem solve, to do all those things. So on behalf of the entire Change Ed team, thank you, Dr. Hicks, for coming on and being here with us. Thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this conversation. And we'd like to remind you to model your own process for your students.